In every monarchy, there are moments when history seems to tighten its grip, when quiet figures are suddenly thrust toward the center, not because they seek the spotlight, but because stability demands it. As scrutiny surrounding Prince Andrew intensifies once again, palace observers are increasingly turning their attention to two royals, long known for diligence rather than drama: Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. In royal circles, whispers have grown louder. Edward and Sophie are more important than ever. But why now? And what does their rising significance reveal about the future of the House of Windsor? This is not a story of scandal. It is a story of contrast, of quiet resilience emerging in a moment of institutional strain. The modern British monarchy has endured seismic change in recent years. The passing of Queen Elizabeth II marked the end of a 70-year reign defined by composure, discipline, and an almost sacred sense of duty. Her successor, King Charles III, inherited not only the crown, but a complicated landscape, one shaped by public scrutiny, generational transition, and reputational challenges. Among those challenges, the lingering shadow surrounding Prince Andrew remains particularly delicate. His withdrawal from public life did not fully close the chapter. Rather, it opened a prolonged period of recalibration for the monarchy. In this environment, every working royal carries added weight. And that is precisely where Edward and Sophie enter the conversation. For decades, Prince Edward was often described as the quietest of Queen Elizabeth's children. Unlike Andrew or even Princess Anne, Edward rarely generated headlines. His early ventures outside royal duty, particularly his foray into television production, were met with mixed reactions. Yet what seemed like uncertainty in youth gradually evolved into something far more valuable: steadiness. Sophie, meanwhile, built her own identity carefully and deliberately. Before marriage, she pursued a career in public relations, earning respect as a professional long before she was a duchess. When she married Edward in 1999, the royal family was still navigating the turbulence left by the 1990s. Divorces, tabloid frenzies, and reputational bruises. Together, Edward and Sophie carved out a model of royal life built on consistency rather than spectacle. It would be impossible to examine Edward and Sophie's rising importance without acknowledging the context. Prince Andrew's retreat from official duties created a visible vacuum within the institution. As a once senior working royal, Andrew had represented the crown at numerous engagements, military functions, and diplomatic gatherings. When those responsibilities evaporated, redistribution became necessary. This was not merely a matter of scheduling, it was about symbolism. Who would embody continuity? Who would reassure the public? Who would quietly demonstrate that the monarchy still functions? Increasingly, the answer became Edward and Sophie. When King Charles granted Edward the title Duke of Edinburgh, a title previously held by Prince Philip, it was more than ceremonial. The title carries deep historical resonance. Prince Philip had spent decades building the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme into one of the most respected youth development programs in the world. Passing that title to Edward signalled trust, not only familial trust, but institutional trust. For Edward, it represented inheritance of purpose. For Sophie, it elevated her platform, positioning her alongside one of the monarchy's most respected legacies. If Edward is the quiet engine, Sophie is often described as the monarchy's empathetic bridge. In recent years, the Duchess of Edinburgh has taken on high-profile engagements related to women's rights, conflict-related sexual violence prevention, and disability advocacy. Her visits to war zones and humanitarian regions have earned praise from observers who note her calm confidence and clear communication. Some commentators suggest Sophie has emerged as one of the monarchy's most effective soft power ambassadors, particularly in areas where discretion and sensitivity are paramount. In a time when public trust is fragile, such qualities matter immensely. The monarchy has gradually streamlined its roster of full-time working royals. With Prince Harry stepping back from duties and Andrew's withdrawal, the operational burden has narrowed to a smaller core group. That group includes King Charles III, Queen Camilla, Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, Princess Anne, and now, increasingly, Edward and Sophie. The Edinburghs have stepped in to represent the crown at state dinners, commemorations, and international engagements, often without fanfare, yet with unmistakable reliability. In palace strategy discussions, reliability may be the most prized quality of all. Interestingly, Public sentiment toward Edward and Sophie has strengthened in recent years. Opinion polls consistently show growing approval ratings, particularly among older Britons who value duty and stability. They are rarely controversial, they are rarely divisive, they are rarely dramatic. And in the current climate, rarely may be the strongest endorsement available. As renewed attention periodically returns to Andrew's past controversies, the monarchy must navigate carefully. Every public appearance by a senior royal becomes part of a broader narrative. The institution cannot afford missteps, it cannot afford ambiguity. Edward and Sophie's presence at major events sends a subtle message. The monarchy remains operational, focused, and forward-looking. They represent continuity without reopening wounds. Behind palace walls, dynamics are undoubtedly complex. Edward has long maintained a reputation as the most private of Queen Elizabeth's sons. He was known to share a particularly close bond with Prince Philip in later years, especially regarding the Duke of Edinburgh award. Some royal commentators believe that this closeness influenced Charles's decision to bestow the Edinburgh title upon Edward. Sophie, too, developed a famously warm relationship with Queen Elizabeth II. In fact, she was often described as one of the late Queen's favourite in-laws, a trusted confidant who blended professionalism with genuine affection. That legacy now strengthens their standing. As Prince William prepares for an eventual future kingship, the role of supporting senior royals becomes even more critical. Edward and Sophie occupy a unique generational space, experienced enough to command respect, young enough to remain active for years, unburdened by direct succession pressure. They can support without overshadowing. In a monarchy built on hierarchy, that balance is invaluable. Royal institutions rely heavily on optics. Photographs matter, appearances matter, tone matters. When Edward and Sophie attend events, they project a sense of understated assurance. Their body language is composed, their speeches are measured, their engagements are purposeful. In contrast to louder headlines elsewhere, their consistency becomes a strategic asset. Some commentators have gone so far as to describe Sophie as the monarchy's secret weapon. Why? Because she connects easily, because she listens, because she avoids theatrics. In diplomatic settings, especially abroad, such traits foster trust. In domestic settings, they reinforce accessibility. In times of scandal, even indirect scandal, warmth can be as powerful as authority. Prince Edward's journey has been one of gradual transformation. Once viewed as the least prominent of Queen Elizabeth's children, he now stands as a senior pillar of the institution. His military honorary roles, philanthropic commitments, and steady representation contribute to a broader narrative. Redemption through dedication. He does not dominate headlines. He outlasts them. As Andrew's situation remains a sensitive topic, the monarchy's internal rebalancing appears deliberate. Responsibilities once shared across a broader network now concentrate within a tighter circle. Edward and Sophie's expanded visibility is not accidental. It reflects strategic necessity. Their reliability reduces risk, their professionalism reduces distraction, their presence reduces uncertainty. The Duke of Edinburgh Award remains one of the monarchy's most respected initiatives. Under Edward's stewardship, it continues to expand globally. In many ways, this program embodies the monarchy's modern relevance: youth empowerment, skill development, community engagement. By nurturing this legacy, Edward reinforces not only his father's memory, but the monarchy's forward momentum. From advocacy missions to Commonwealth tours, Sophie's international engagements have grown in profile. In regions where the monarchy seeks to maintain diplomatic goodwill, her presence signals continuity and compassion. As Britain's global relationships evolve, such soft diplomacy cannot be underestimated. The contrast between Andrew's controversies and Edward and Sophie's steadiness has not gone unnoticed. One narrative revolves around retreat, the other revolves around responsibility. In the court of public opinion, responsibility often wins. The phrase circulating among commentators captures a broader truth. Edward and Sophie are not merely supporting players anymore. They are essential representatives, trusted emissaries, stabilizing forces. As scrutiny intensifies elsewhere, their value multiplies. Monarchies think in decades, not days. Edward and Sophie's quiet consistency may never dominate front pages, but it strengthens the institution's foundation. In times of turbulence, foundations matter more than flourishes. Beyond titles and strategy, there is a human story. Edward and Sophie have raised their children largely out of the spotlight. They have balanced duty with privacy. They have avoided public feuds. Their approach suggests a belief that monarchy is not about spectacle, it is about service. As the monarchy navigates ongoing challenges, the rise of Prince Edward and Sophie underscores an enduring lesson. Power does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, steady, dependable, and indispensable. In the intensifying shadow of Andrew's controversies, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh stand not as replacements, but as reinforcements. And in that reinforcement lies the monarchy's quiet resilience. As scrutiny surrounding Prince Andrew continues to resurface in cycles, the monarchy faces a familiar but uncomfortable truth. Reputational recovery is never instantaneous. It is gradual, it is strategic, and above all, it is cumulative. That cumulative strength now rests heavily on the shoulders of steady figures, including Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. While they may not seek prominence, the institution increasingly leans on them in visible and invisible ways. Expectation within royal circles is not spoken openly, but it is understood. With fewer working royals available, each appearance, speech, and overseas visit carries amplified significance. Edward and Sophie are no longer supplementary, they are essential. From the earliest days of his reign, King Charles III made clear his vision of a streamlined monarchy. The concept was practical. Fewer working royals, clearer roles, more focused representation. But slimming down the monarchy also meant increasing reliance on a core group. Alongside Queen Camilla, Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, Princess Anne, Edward and Sophie now form a crucial structural beam within the royal framework. Charles's decision to grant Edward the Duke of Edinburgh title was more than honouring a family promise. It was an operational decision. It filled a vacuum. It reinforced stability. It reassured traditionalists. And perhaps most importantly, it ensured continuity with the legacy of Prince Philip. One of the monarchy's greatest challenges is the tension between public memory and current reality. Andrew's past associations continue to shape public perception, even as he remains absent from official duties. The monarchy cannot erase history, but it can recalibrate focus. This is where Edward and Sophie become quietly powerful. They embody a scandal-free public record, decades of steady service, a low-drama family narrative. In communication strategy, consistency is currency, and the Edinburghs possess it in abundance. If one were to examine recent royal tours and overseas engagements, a pattern emerges. Sophie's role has expanded with notable confidence. Her work related to women's rights, humanitarian outreach, and Commonwealth engagement has given her global credibility. In diplomatic circles, trust is built through repeated presence, and Sophie has delivered that presence without misstep. At a time when the monarchy must carefully manage its international image, her reliability is an asset of considerable value. Observers have noted that Sophie's style differs from flashier royal tours of previous decades. There are fewer theatrical moments and more intimate engagements, roundtable discussions, site visits, quiet meetings with survivors and advocates. That tone signals modernity, and modernity signals adaptability. Edward's leadership style mirrors his wife's approach, calm, measured, understated. He has increasingly represented the crown at military commemorations and state events that require dignity without controversy. Unlike some members of the royal family whose every word becomes headline fodder, Edward rarely generates distraction. His speeches are thoughtful but unprovocative. His presence commands respect without commanding spectacle. In moments when the monarchy must project seriousness, Edward's composure becomes invaluable. Royal siblings often carry complex relationships shaped by hierarchy, personality, and history. Edward, as the youngest son of Queen Elizabeth II, once stood at the periphery of attention. Today, he stands much closer to the operational centre. Meanwhile, Andrew's retreat has subtly shifted internal dynamics. Where once Andrew represented a prominent working royal with military associations and international engagements, Edward now occupies that space, not with identical style, but with renewed credibility. It is not a replacement narrative, it is a recalibration. As heir to the throne, Prince William must consider not only his eventual kingship, but the structure that will support it. A future monarch depends on trusted senior advisors, experienced family representatives, loyal institutional allies. Edward and Sophie fit that profile seamlessly. They do not compete for attention. They do not complicate succession narratives. They reinforce unity. When William ascends, their experience could become even more central, offering continuity between generations without overshadowing the new reign. Sometimes importance is defined not by what one does, but by what one avoids. Edward and Sophie have largely avoided public feuds, explosive interviews, controversial statements, media spectacle. In a media environment that thrives on conflict, their restraint becomes a strategic counterbalance. Every institution needs figures who absorb attention rather than generate volatility. Edward and Sophie's children, Lady Louise Windsor and James, Earl of Wessex, have largely remained outside the intense spotlight that surrounds William's family. That quieter upbringing reflects deliberate choice. It presents a model of royal life that blends duty with normalcy, a subtle message that service need not equal celebrity. As the monarchy evolves, this middle path model may prove influential. Recent years have left segments of the British public fatigued by royal controversies. In polling trends, support for the monarchy often correlates with perceptions of stability. When headlines become turbulent, trust can waver. Edward and Sophie represent the antidote to fatigue. Their engagements rarely surprise. Their messaging rarely divides. Their demeanor rarely escalates. In an era where institutions are frequently questioned, calm consistency becomes a form of reassurance. Having spent decades within the royal system, Edward and Sophie carry invaluable institutional memory. They witnessed the constitutional precision of Queen Elizabeth II, the disciplined modernization of King Charles, the generational shift toward William and Catherine. That memory allows them to serve as bridges, not only between generations, but between eras. In times of scandal, institutional memory prevents overreaction. It encourages patience. It reinforces precedent. It preserves balance. While Andrew's situation remains legally distinct and personally complex, the monarchy's strategy appears clear: forward momentum. Rather than repeatedly revisiting controversy, the institution amplifies steady service. Edward and Sophie are central to that amplification. They are proof that the monarchy can adapt. The monarchy can recalibrate. The monarchy can endure turbulence. Their growing importance does not erase Andrew's chapter. It reframes the broader story. Within any monarchy, trust operates on multiple levels. Public trust, governmental trust, internal family trust. Edward and Sophie have steadily accumulated all three. Government officials value reliability. The public values discretion. The family values loyalty. Few royals satisfy all three categories simultaneously. The Edinburghs increasingly do. If there is a defining theme of this moment, it may be what could be called the quiet strength doctrine. Not bold declarations, not dramatic reinventions, not headline-grabbing reform, but incremental reinforcement. Edward and Sophie exemplify that doctrine. In times when louder narratives dominate, quiet strength becomes revolutionary in its own way. As the Andrew scandal intensifies in public discourse, the monarchy does not respond with dramatic overhauls. It responds with reinforcement. And those reinforcements wear the titles Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. Prince Edward and Sophie are not the loudest figures in the royal story. They are not the most photographed. They are not the most polarizing. But increasingly, they are the most necessary. In the long arc of monarchy, where survival depends on balance, their steadiness may prove to be one of the institution's most valuable assets. Every centuries-old institution develops what historians often call a survival instinct, an almost reflexive ability to adapt under pressure. The British monarchy has demonstrated that instinct repeatedly, from abdication crises to modern media storms. As attention periodically returns to Prince Andrew, the institution's response has not been dramatic confrontation. Instead, it has been structural reinforcement. At the centre of that reinforcement stand Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. Their growing prominence is not reactive panic. It is strategic recalibration. Royal watchers often focus on symbolism, and symbolism in monarchy is power. When Edward and Sophie appear at state banquets, military commemorations, or Commonwealth events, their presence sends layered signals. Continuity of service, stability in leadership, commitment to public duty. In contrast to scandal narratives, their appearances visually re-center the institution around responsibility, and optics matter. The British monarchy is not merely a constitutional framework, it is a visual one. The image projected to the public must reinforce confidence. Edward and Sophie's calm demeanour and disciplined approach serve that purpose almost effortlessly. Under King Charles III, the monarchy has entered a new operational era. Charles has long advocated efficiency, sustainability, and modernisation within royal structures, but efficiency also requires trusted deputies. Edward's expanded workload, particularly in representing the Crown domestically and internationally, reflects Charles's confidence. It also reflects necessity. With a slimmer working roster, dependable representatives are not optional. They are essential. Sophie's increasing diplomatic engagements similarly demonstrate this delegation of trust. Her involvement in sensitive global issues indicates that the king views her not merely as supportive, but as capable. While Charles reigns, the long-term future belongs to Prince William, and William's reign will require institutional allies who understand both tradition and transition. Edward and Sophie occupy a uniquely valuable space. They are senior enough to command respect. They are removed enough from direct succession to avoid rivalry. They are experienced enough to mentor without overshadowing. For William, that combination could be indispensable. In palace strategy, alliances within the family are rarely spoken of publicly, but they shape stability behind closed doors. Among royal commentators, there is growing recognition that Sophie may represent one of the monarchy's strongest soft power assets. Her visits to humanitarian regions and her advocacy work are not ceremonial gestures. They require empathy, preparation, and emotional resilience. In global diplomacy, tone often matters more than title. Sophie's tone is steady, respectful, and measured, qualities that contrast sharply with the volatility sometimes associated with royal controversies. As Britain navigates complex international relationships post-Brexit, figures like Sophie become strategically important bridges. In modern constitutional monarchies, public trust is currency. When controversy surrounds one member of the royal family, the broader institution must replenish that currency through visible service. Edward and Sophie contribute to that replenishment through consistency, regular engagements, clear messaging, absence of drama. Their reliability becomes a stabilizing counterweight. Polling trends in recent years have suggested that steady, scandal-free royals tend to rise quietly in approval during turbulent periods. That pattern appears consistent here. The late Queen Elizabeth II understood perhaps better than anyone the value of silent endurance. Her reign was defined by restraint. She rarely responded publicly to controversy. Instead, she reinforced duty. Edward and Sophie seem to embody that philosophy. Their approach mirrors the Queen's core principle: never explain excessively, never escalate unnecessarily, simply continue serving. In a sense, their rising importance reflects the endurance of Elizabeth's institutional blueprint. Media narratives have evolved. Where once Edward was occasionally portrayed as peripheral, coverage increasingly frames him as central to operational stability. Sophie, once discussed primarily as a supportive spouse, is now frequently highlighted as a serious diplomatic figure. This narrative shift is not accidental. It mirrors the practical redistribution of royal responsibilities. As Andrew remains sidelined, the spotlight naturally reorients, and the Edinburghs have stepped into that light without appearing to chase it. Royal strategy always involves risk calculation. Amplifying controversial figures carries reputational risk. Overexposing younger heirs carries generational risk. Retreating too far from public life carries relevance risk. Edward and Sophie present minimal risk across these categories. They are seasoned but not polarizing, visible but not overexposed, senior but not competitive. In times of reputational sensitivity, low-risk figures become high-value assets. The Commonwealth remains a cornerstone of the monarchy's international identity. With some member nations reassessing their constitutional relationships, diplomatic finesse is essential. Edward's long-standing involvement with the Duke of Edinburgh Award, active in dozens of Commonwealth nations, strengthens these connections. Sophie's overseas advocacy reinforces them. Together, they provide continuity at a moment when the monarchy must carefully maintain global relationships. Royal historians often note that internal equilibrium determines public strength. When family dynamics fracture publicly, institutional credibility suffers. When family members present unity, even amid disagreement, stability is reinforced. Edward has long been perceived as the least confrontational of Queen Elizabeth's sons. Sophie has rarely been drawn into public disputes. Their equilibrium becomes a quiet stabilizer within a family that has, at times, faced highly visible tensions.